So you would just send a copy of it?
Oh, yeah, you can just drag it, it'll just drag onto the, if you mean the power, you mean the
Yes,
PowerPoint?
yeah.
Or the, yeah.
Go ahead. Tony, while you're doing that, I would say if everyone is here, we are commencing the Washington Community Arts Charter School Board of Trustees meeting set for today, March 14th, 2012. I'll to show the time. The meeting is beginning at 6:27, and also please everyone be advised that this meeting is being filmed. So having said that, I'd like to welcome everyone, our guests, and I would also like to ask if there's any public comment. We try to ask that public comment be limited to each person speaking only for 3 minutes, and then probably 10 minutes total for the public conversation. Is there any public comment? Okay, there being no public comment, let's briefly review the agenda. First item, which is number 3. Third item would be review and approval of the minutes. Item number 4, we will get an update from the Executive Director on the enrollment campaign and recent open houses. We will have our committee reports. That's item number 5, Finance, Facilities, Program, and Governance. We'll make brief reports. And in one of these meetings, there will be a motion to approve for the new trustees. We'll have next item will be an update of current staffing and plans for hiring for staff for the 2012-2013 academic year. Item number 7 will be an update on the Executive Director evaluation and contract negotiations. And then item number 8 will be consideration of agenda items for the April board meeting. And then hopefully we'll be able to wrap up everything in 2 hours and adjourn. So having said that, let's go into the item number 3, review and approval of the minutes. Tony has attached to your package meetings from the February 15th meeting, and now can I have a motion to accept these minutes? Do I have a second? Second? Okay. And then now we have some discussion about these, please.
Actually, James, the version that we should be reviewing is posted right now.
Oh, it is? Okay.
It's online.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Dave.
The version was sent around
Okay.
weeks ago. There were no comments on that.
Okay. Hey, Dave, thank you very much. Okay. Yes.
Our
Aaron.
name's missing. I know.
It's corrected on the online.
So the online version, okay, the record shows on the online version. Okay, so we will be, if we vote to approve these minutes, we are actually voting the online minutes that are currently posted under the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School website for the February 15th, 2012 Board of Trustees meeting. Okay, any further discussion? Okay. Ira? No. Okay.
Just vote.
Okay. All right. There being no further discussion, I would ask the trustees to approve the minutes by a show of hands. All in favor? Okay, let the record show that the minutes were approved by members of the Thank you very much, David. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the update on the enrollment campaign and the recent, it says open house, but I believe it was recent open houses.
May I suggest we actually adjust the agenda since we have Joanne with us having reported to the Facilities Committee, and that we begin with the update from the Facilities Committee, which would include Joanne.
Thank you, Tony. Okay.
First of all, the presentation by Joanne was fantastic. As you can see, a little bit of temptation to see it yourself, and items like that that are innovative, creative, and fun for the young kids. We're going to meet again on the 28th of March at 3 o'clock and invite parents and teachers so that we can kind of get more ideas and let the creative senses flow with Joanne. And from there, our next step will kind of narrow down ideas and fly from there. And that would coordinate with budget and help from people in the city. And we're going to meet again on the 11th of April in a scheduled meeting, which may be the next step after that. I mean, we can play that by ear. We did not get to the classroom expansion situation, because I'm going to let Tony talk about that in his presentation today. And as far as the playground is concerned, Susan has reported, she's like the mastermind of this work crew, so if you're scheduled to show up, you bet or you get shot. We're very tough here, we punish, if you know. But cleanup is scheduled for Saturday, but we're not sure what time. And I have a meeting tomorrow morning with the Assistant Director of the DPW here in Gloucester. Referred to me as a possible person that we can ask, may not get a positive answer, but maybe we will. It's like a 50-50 chance that he would come up here with a machine and turn all that stuff into wood chips, except what we want to save, and get rid of it instead of burning it. So I'm going to have that answer tomorrow morning. 12 o'clock tomorrow, meeting in Marblehead at the charter school with Mike Ruth, athletic director, and we're going to look at facilities and equipment and the floor, and I'm going to enjoy their lunch. That'll be exciting, for sure. And we're going to talk, and he's got all kinds of pamphlets and brochures, and for the future of obtaining athletic and recreational equipment. And I'll report back, I guess, in our next meeting. And that's it. Thank you again, Joanne.
And Joanne?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do it again, but more abbreviated, just to, so my name's Joanne Hiramura, and I'm a landscape architect, and I work in an architectural office in Brookline, Studio MLA Architects. And we primarily design facilities for children and children's environments. And I've specifically been designing playgrounds for like the past 15 years. And I met Shay a couple years ago when she was at Lowell, and I was on the team to design an art yard for her school there. And I came up a couple weeks ago to meet with Tony and staff and took a look at the space. And our office is going to be working with you to working through design, conceptual design of this play space. So working with the staff and community, whoever's interested, getting input in what's wanted out there and what would be wonderful for the kids. And like Ira said, we're going to do that in a couple weeks, have this little design workshop that'll take a couple hours so everybody will be talking to each other and can hear what everybody wants, and we can come to some consensus, and I will go back and come up with a couple conceptual design plans for the space, and we'll come back again and see what people think and synthesize that into one plan. And from that, you'll have a plan that you can fundraise from, and there'll be a preliminary cost estimate. And that way we'll figure out how this could all get done. But we're going to concentrate just on this first conceptual design part first. So I was just going to, I gave a really quick presentation just of what my office does, what I do, just to give you an idea of sort of the possibilities. This picture here is a play dome. So one thing that we like to do is provide kids with things that don't necessarily look like what they think of as play equipment, but have them use their imagination, which is what they do, in just playing with it. And that's just really what play is. It's being engaged in what you're doing and enjoying it, and doing it just because you enjoy it. And in this setting, it's probably, there's learning involved with it, and from what most teachers know, that's really how kids do learn. They learn through playing and discovering. So, just read this really quick. Our experiences form the core of our being, our sense of ourselves in relation to the world of nature, of people, of things. It is, meaning childhood, it is for powerful experiences that forever fuel the scientist, the poet, the artist, and the imagination within us. So when we design these spaces for children, we're designing environments and experiences that will give kids the opportunity to learn how to play with each other, learn about themselves, learn about nature, learn about their world, and interacting with it, discovering, creating with it. So just this dome, I think these kids, when they first actually saw this, I was doing a little tour with their dad who works for New York City Parks, and he brought his kids, and at first the kids were like, kind of like, what is that? But it didn't take them any time at all they were climbing on it. They're obviously different ages, just like as you'll have, so we want to have things out there that all different age groups can find fun and discovery with. Creating places that, this is just like a vantage point. So just a place where you can actually get a different view of your world is important. These are arches, which just mark the entry of a space, but they have musical chimes in them. So they're actually tuned chimes. They're tuned to different scales. And so it's using, this really was just an idea of like, oh, we need sort of an arch and entryway, but making things more than just one for one use. Things, simple things like, canoes, we put this canoe on springs. And I think, Gloucester and water and boats and has a great, there's a great chance to do things like that. And this is just to give you an idea sort of how just things kind of come to be. So this was an idea of having these sculptural fish that spray water. And so I found an artist, a sculptor, and actually these fish in the park are indigenous fish to this area, and it's a water play, area in Kentucky.
If I may, so this is kids who go under the water? And
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
It's interesting because there are flying fish that have a water spraying from the Sort of Free Library.
Oh.
And so it's interesting. I think also, doesn't the New York Folk Museum have chimes?
Yes, they do.
So they're
Yes.
wonderful
Yeah.
ways
Exactly,
to
same
bring
thing.
more out now.
Yes. So this is a playground in Cambridge that I did. This is a playhouse actually. It has like the front steps, a porch. It actually has a mail slot.
Is that the one on the common?
No, I did. It was part of that,
Oh,
but
you
this is on Lopez Street. It's
Yeah, I know.
you do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, very short one-way street, and it's right in the middle of the block.
yeah, that's a nifty little.
He's a Cambridgeite.
Oh, really?
I'm in both places.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got
He told me where.
I've got about,
And here.
I don't know, 6 to 8 playgrounds in Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was Cambridge. So this was my hallway. These are the chairs that were on the porch. These are in Springs. This is my living room. And this is a window with window boxes. The art happened to be my daughter's artwork when she was 6 or something like that. But so everything also, I work with a fabricator. We've been working in outdoor environments forever. So in terms of durability and holding up to the weather, just have a lot of experience about that. And it's important that these places become places for your community, that they're comfortable for everyone to gather, not just the kids, but your school, parents, a place where you can have barbecues or Brookline, next to the Brookline Arts Center, which used to be a firehouse, so we had this theme, and we met with the neighborhood and the community on this, and this was the piece that I did. So, and I actually worked with the fire department there. They had a salvage yard. They let us take apart part of the fire truck, and that's part of it's hard to see, I guess, in this light, but took steering wheels, fire hose as a weaving wall, and there's lots of opportunities for weaving walls. I've done other weaving frames and things for outside. fire hydrant, and we did a fire extinguisher stool. So, and I just think this community is just very resourceful and creative, and I think, a lot of things can get done. And when I design these places, I really do think about the space themselves, how they'll be used, that they need to feel comfortable for kids to use them in, like, either by themselves or in small groups and big groups. It's, all those things are really important. It can't just be one type of thing. It has to be very flexible. It has to be something that kids will find, discover new things and all the time. So fairly, open-ended, can't be that specific. This is just an example about, themes, and this was, birds and migration, and did these, laser-cut birds, which migrated over Houston, and it's also about putting things out there, so kids might not get it, right away when they first come to school, but maybe by the time they're in 3rd grade, maybe there's a curriculum that talks about X, Y, Z, and there's things out there that, they can make connections. And it's also about using all your senses. So it's not just about gross motor, it's about smell, putting plant materials out there that you learn about, plants, and there's rosemary or lavender, and sensory gardens or prisms for light, playing with the light, and chimes, and musical, instruments out there. Then your space is particularly natural. It's a nest that we did at the Ecotarium, and I could definitely see, something like that out there. This is at the Boston Nature Center. This tree was actually a fallen tree, so we cleaned up all the, little branches, and it's out there for kids to climb on. These kids actually built all the branches up on that teepee thing, but we actually put out there a frame, like an A-frame that's concreted in the ground, so there's something so they can build against. And making sure that you have spaces for gathering, big groups, small groups. That's your space. And it has, really great features already. I mean, there's slope, there's rocks and boulders with lichen, and those bridges are wonderful, and there's a lot of. Yes, it is pretty out there. It's very nice. So I'm very excited. Oh, that's us. Yeah, that's you. Yeah. So.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's
Thank you
changed a
so
lot.
much.
I think it'll be great.
Exciting.
I would probably just take off.
Okay.
Yes. Rather than sit through your meeting.
Thanks so much. Shall I eject this?
That ends the facility committee report.
Thank you, Evan.
Lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That would be good, yeah. But not for this. Yeah. So you go on and you want to actually do plans and everything. But there's something in another room.
Yeah. So that's already lost.
The cherry blossoms are the fear is that it can't get so much.
That's the movie.
Yeah, they're not strong.
Yeah.
So it was 80 degrees Monday.
Okay. In the interest of moving ahead here, at 6:45 or 6:46 right now, so let's try to keep our eye on the ball in terms of the time. Thank you again, Joanne.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Leader.
So we'll move back to item number 4. It's okay.
Yeah.
We don't want to go to this, please. The update on the enrollment campaign, and it says recent nothing last year, but we can cover both of them. unless you feel that would be redundant, that we covered it.
Yeah, they just, both open houses went well. We had large turnout in one, then we did the other. Great thanks to Gordon Barrett for putting together the posters. We had over 150 posters put up all over Gloucester, Rockport, Hamilton, Wenham, Salem, Beverly, all the Ys, other social service organizations, libraries, a pretty broad scope. And then in between, we actually used the same posters, but we got bright neon stickers, and then updated the open house date, so we could just go around to those same places and then stick a neon sticker on top of the information, so we got double use out of them. Special thanks obviously to the staff and everybody who came up. Really all-out effort to welcome people, and to the board as well, who are here. It's particularly nice when you have someone like Dave Buchanan in the room who can actually say, I'm a board member, but also a parent, and my children are here, and another one coming. This is sort of a powerful statement for an open house, so thank you, Dave, for that. And the results are that, although Nikki will be continuing to enter the information into our database, and we file our pre-enrollment on Friday. As of this moment, we have 207 students in our pre-enrollment. So we're meeting the target that we wanted to be at, and I think very strong to be filing those kind of numbers with the state on Friday.
What does that mean, pre-enrollment? They have filled out an application?
No, the students go through your lottery, and your returning students are your pre-enrollment for the state. And your first, it's important for a number of reasons. One is that you're always going to have some movement in your enrollment throughout the year, but the state will only fund the cap, which is your pre-enrollment. So let's say next year we actually had let's say our pre-enrollment is ultimately a 210. If the 211th student applied and wanted to come, the state would not fund that student coming to the school.
After March 16th.
Right, whatever your pre-enrollment is sets your cap for next year, so you can't exceed it, but you can continue to have movement within the specific students who are sitting in those seats, but it reserves the ability to fill all of those seats throughout the year. So very important number for us.
That's great.
Those numbers, how does the breakdown work for the grade levels? Are there some gaps?
The 8th grade, we've still got room for, I think, 13 there, and 6, 7, we've got, looks like our enrollment in 6, 7 will probably be around what it was this year, so it'll be in the range of 60 kids. But at full enrollment would be 80. And that's why, in terms of our, we could have ended up with a pre-enrollment of 240, which is the cap for the charter as defined. In our, if we were absolutely full, every seat taken, we'd be 240 kids. But because we're building as we go along, the likelihood of having 13 one-year 8th graders choose to suddenly come to the school is not significant. And similar with older kids. So I think that we're going to, probably end up being somewhere between, 185, 190, and 200 for next year, realistically.
Okay, so if I can just do the math here quickly, if we're 207 right now, and 6, 7 is 20, and 8th is 13 short, that's the 33 difference. It gets you from 207 plus 33 equals 240. So we're really not short any other grades then.
Right, well actually, kindergarten will be operating waitlist essentially. Kindergarten is oversubscribed. First grade is very close to becoming oversubscribed. And we're in, second and third grade, I can't remember exactly what the balance is, but essentially all those lower grades are going to be full.
So when you say oversubscribed,
Meaning that sometimes you have a mix where you've actually got, let's say you have 20 kids in 2 sections of K1. You know, your ideal enrollment would be fully balanced. So you'd have 20 kindergarten students and 20 first graders for a total of 40. But in any given year, you might actually have 25 kindergarten students and 15 first graders.
okay.
And so, you know, you've got, like, we've got a balloon right now, and we've got a few additional students in the current, I think, 4th grade, 4th or 5th. And so, you know, that a slightly larger number then moves up into the next
Okay.
grade, so.
Great.
Tony, do you know the numbers on the return rate for kids who are coming back from this year?
Yeah, with the 8th grade graduating, we have had 109 students in our returning enrollment. And so, just like any public school, the assumption is they're all coming back unless they decide not to, so.
Right. So that's 109 out of
135.
But at 135.
minus grade 8.
Yeah, that's the difference, is 109, and then your 8th grade is difference between 109 and 135.
That's great.
Yeah, exciting, that's really exciting,
That's what we
and
were-
congratulations to everyone, clearly all out, everybody on board effort, I think it paid off.
What we were hoping to do.
And what's the drop dead time on Friday that applications can be submitted?
Well, we have a lottery at noon, so, you know, we're done at noon with the pre-enrollment, and we'll file then for pretty immediately.
Okay.
Because you're submitting your total numbers of students by town, by grade, by town. So, you know, if you have you submit all of your 4th grade, and it shows how many in the 4th grade are from Gloucester, Rockport, Essex, whatever it is, and that's what they require for the pre-enrollment.
But, so I guess what I'm asking is if a family hears about it at 10:30 on Friday, they can still fill out an application or two?
For lottery, oh yeah, for lottery, and then be in the lottery, and they can still apply. I mean, we're going to continue to enroll students. Last year, we had 40 students ultimately at its height, we had 40 students on our wait lists. And we'll continue to do that just like any other charter would, because I fully expect there'll be some movement.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the hardest hit for us was the economy, and we had, in the end, 3 or 4 families move to Florida. We had several move to Vermont and Maine. And, the economy's not looking a whole lot better for anybody, I don't think. So, you know, we have to see how it plays out, and we'll continue to hold open houses and invite people up for tours. And so, you know, we're not done by any means. And, you know, part of what we will next move to in the admissions campaign is that we will have kindergarten and first grade families up for a potluck, and particularly as soon as the kindergarten and first grade teachers are hired, to meet their teachers for next year, get to know the families, have them get to know each other. So that, you know, you want to remove as much trepidation about your new school as you possibly can, and help the kids get to know each other, so.
And Tony, I wanted to say, I really appreciate your extra time, particularly in that and all the staff, but I know you've really worked many extra hours just to even get the building ready, everything soup to nuts to make it happen. And it's a Saturday for everybody, so it's additional time. So thanks for that. In terms of follow-up, I wonder also if we can notify those families who are now enrolled about any events that the schools are holding for the next couple of months, you know,
Just
there are parent events. There was a great game night last Friday.
Yeah,
I didn't actually get up here, but I heard it was great.
It was fun.
It's a relatively simple thing to get underway if you got.
Well, and particularly now because of the new Rediker system that Nikki's worked so hard on. I mean, we actually can send, they established email accounts as part of the process. So we now have the ability to email all of the new students, their families, with updates on stuff that's happening at the school, invitations to events that are specific to them. I do think, particularly for the younger children, but really for all of them, one of the things we learned from last year is we really want to have those touch points frequently enough throughout the rest of the spring and the summer, particularly as the weather gets nice, so that the kids have a real sense of the new community they're joining and the excitement around that. I mean, already we've got this huge group of kindergarten, first grade kids, and the thing they wanted to go see was, well, which one of these rooms will be ours? So, and the playgrounds playing out too. They're excited about it.
That's why I want to ask Nikki if she can make sure you email all these people about this meeting on the 28th of March. I think those people would like to see this presentation and go out and listen to, the potential plans. That will be invaluable, along with looking at that for the total school. I know Vicki was going to remind her, but if Nikki can, the details of the meeting, the 28th at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, and so on, that'd be great.
Just to put my risk management cap on for a second, Tony, one of the areas of concern we have is that we get the applications in, but then a lot of things come up and people can't show up, as you said, like the economy has a debilitating effect on some of these things. But we had spoken about the idea of these sort of like almost affinity group meetings, like with a church or a local community organization group or a community-based care organization group, whether it's the housing authority or the of several churches that have strong community outreach things. Where have we had some follow-up on any of that? Do we have any of these things scheduled? Because I think that we don't want to keep our, we don't want to go, this is obviously a fantastic number to see. I think it just warms everyone's heart to see a number over 200, but we want to make sure that many seats are filled, when the fall comes around.
Right.
And one of the things we decided on months ago was that we would do a very, a robust, powerful follow-up by going right into the individual communities that people had affinities with, or community-based organizations rather. And do we have any sort of ideas about that, or have we had some invitations or anything?
We haven't yet. It is a key part of the next step, which is to have more of the regional receptions, particularly now that the families who are in these numbers can invite friends to because at the moment our greatest return is being from our current families inviting families to open houses, and then once a new family from an area comes in, saying to each of them, are there other people you think would be interested? Can you invite them to our next open house? So we had one family with 2 children from Saugus who immediately brought another family in to the next open house, and they immediately signed up and put their kids through the lottery and excited about coming. The other thing we've done is that Vicki's been sending out immediate emails to families with the link to the actual enrollment form where they enroll formally. And last time we talked about it, more than 30 had actually already come in, filled in their full form.
32 have officially enrolled.
So in terms of actually fully enrolling, 32 of those new families are already fully, not just pre-enrollments really that have gone through the lottery and indicated that they're interested in attending, but to actually have that many enrolled for next year is significant. So we'll continue to provide updates to everyone on that as well.
Thanks, Tony. I'd like to keep these committee updates down. That one, exactly 15 minutes, which is fine, because that's obviously our priority, the most important thing. But if we can get through these in a little more, maybe 10 minutes maximum kind of fashion, that'd be okay. I see the next item, the committee reports, where I'd like to see if we can keep these kind of trim. Finance committee really doesn't need to take a lot of time on this. I just think that we had a review of the finances. I think that the main thing is that Cindy Marie is right now working on the 2012-2013 budget, and the Finance Committee had just reviewed how that will be handle, basically Cindy and Tony will take the pre-enrollment numbers that we'll have on Friday, using that as the underpinnings for the numbers in the budget. Tony wants to use a lower than current tuition number. The current tuition number is, started the year at 11,800, at the end of the year 11,200, and now for the sake of being conservative, the model is going to be based on an $11,000 number, so that we'll have a built-in margin of safety in case there's another cut, in case there's any sort of surprises. We had two very big surprises last year, one for 35%, one for 8% of the total budget. So, which I would like to credit Tony and Cindy really doing a fantastic job getting through in terms of the minimal impact it had to the program and the delivery of the quality education service here. But I think that's something that we'll look forward to at the next finance committee meeting, and we won't really know that because we don't have visibility of the final numbers yet. Let's see, we also discussed the 501c3, and I think the timing of things is such that we will probably see we're shooting for a June final clearance of the Gloucester Community Arts Educational Foundation in June, which will allow us to approach individuals for solicitations. We already have the ability to approach foundations because we have a relationship with Salem Academy Charter School for them to serve as our fiscal agent. So we can approach, we're not stopped by any means from doing it, but when it comes to solicitations of individuals, as you know, in Massachusetts, the consumer laws are very high, and the Attorney General requires that you be approved for solicitations first, and that's where we're waiting right now for the foundation. Ira, do you have a question?
How about the line of credit?
Okay, good question. In the line of credit, the banks have once again, the bank rather has pulled back based on the appeal. What we believe is the bank really needs to be a little better educated about there are many moving parts in a relationship where we would have such large deposits. Also, the more important part is that the timeline on the appeal is such that it would never preclude us from paying them back. And third, and finally, I think the bank's biggest concerns are that the school will be shut down. In all three of the judge's opinions, remember this is a court of equity, the equitable solution would never be to close a school down in the middle of the year. So long as we're funded for the school year, we would have received the funds so we could pay it back. The case law is very clear on this, but everyone's entitled to their day in court, so the appeal will go on, and this is what the bankers, I think the bankers really just need to roll up their sleeves and look at the actual time frame of the payments versus when it could be repaid. We're not, with the number, the size that we're looking at for enrollment, it's really not a cash flow. I mean, it's more of a cash flow issue when we get the money. It's not that we're going to have a terrible deficit. Right now, we are looking at a component of our budget, which includes a foundation or personal donation request, which is yet not fulfilled. We hope to have that filled out by June, the end of June, so that when we finish our fiscal year, which ends June 30th, we can say we balanced our budget. We operate the black. Now, if we can't, we can honestly say, well, we weren't able to get on credit, which most of our charter school has. But again, this is really our cash flow. Timing could go off a bit because of receipt of funds in September, but the amount that we would be under budget is not significant enough to in any way negatively impact the program or hiring or anything like that.
We're looking into another bank that might be willing to...
That was my question.
Yeah, exactly. Good question, both of you. Yes.
Is it?
Yes, we are. We went to Century, first of all, because they traditionally had a very strong reputation for lending to charter schools. Most lenders are looking for, in most charter school cases, the charter school owns the real estate. So you have a collateral that you can secure. Here, it's cash flow, but it's also, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is AA rated. So when you have that kind of credit rating, the bank should say, okay, you're getting your money from a AA rated entity. And that's it's not 100% guaranteed like a treasury, but it's pretty darn close. So, and again, I think that the bankers need to be, really have this talked through with thoroughness, rather than just say, oh my gosh, there's a lawsuit there.
Okay.
And I understand their point of view. I've done this for 30 years, so I understand that you want to be conservative when you're dealing with your shareholders and your depositors' money. That all makes sense, but I think that there's enough moving parts here that could be put together properly that would satisfy me. The biggest one being that, if we deposit $2-point-something million in a bank account, they have a right of offset on that account, and that would normally satisfy me.
I have two clients that are, the entire banks are clients of mine. One of them may be interested in helping us, but I'm not sure how to go about that, so I'll talk to you about it.
I think that's the thing to do. Is Cindy Marie has got a fantastic CV as far as her experience with charter schools.
Yeah.
She's basically been responsible for running 8 charter schools. Tony brought her on back in the mid-fall, and it's just been a world of difference in terms of our visibility, the projections that come out on these.
Yeah.
We have monthly numbers that are to the penny every month. We have a phenomenal resource with someone who not only knows finance and accounting, but who knows the DESE very well, who knows the other schools, who understands the community, and can really put us in a relatively strong situation. I think we have a very good resource there. Tony and Cindy Marie work together extremely well. I think they spend probably 2 or 3 days or an afternoon, working on this stuff. We are very attentive to finance. And I think it would be very easy for us to make a presentation like that because we are really on top of
I'll
this.
talk to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
This is the kind of thing we love it when the board members come up with ideas like this. And whatever your backgrounds are, this is the way that you advocate for the school is by bringing your personal contacts to the forefront of this. And I appreciate that. So.
Sometimes it helps.
So anyway, so that's the finance committee at 7:09, so I'll come in within the 10-minute deadline that I proposed for myself. And so let's hear from we've heard from the facilities committee, and now we'll hear from the program committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Vice Chair.
If my program committee colleagues think of something that I don't mention about, I'm just doing a general sweeping statement of what we're thinking about. You can. First, I want to say on behalf of the school that the program committee members, in particular Susan Hogue and David and Jay, are volunteering their time to both inside the school on a weekly basis to help with the administration and program components, instruction, support of head of school as well as the executive director. And I just want to make sure that is made public, that knowledge. So what we have begun looking at is the report card system, the content and process, as well as frequency. So we had a discussion about that. That is an issue that is going to be ongoing for a while. Program goals are primarily centered around K-8 curriculum, instruction, and assessment. For the moment, and more pressingly with an eye towards MCAS prep and improving our scores. Caitlin Featherstone, daughter of our program committee member Jay Featherstone, came and talked to us 2 weeks ago about the structure of K1 as a entity in and of itself, and had some wonderful contributions. She's going to be talking with Tony further about that. In terms of academic year planning, we have begun some discussion about middle school math. Jody is taking a look at several programs, I think in the neighborhood of half a dozen. We had a presentation by Karn, and I can't pronounce her last name, I'm sorry, if anybody knows that, Ingoldshard or something, from the Achievement Network to help us with assessments and learning how to help staff get better at earmarking student progress. Are there other elements that we've been working on that you want to add to? Okay. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
I want to say I was able to attend that meeting, and I have to say, Jay, your daughter's explanation of kindergarten and first grade together, and the importance of making play part of that continuation, but yet also having older children, deal with younger children at a time when you're first starting to grasp kind of authority about things. It was just a terrific presentation, and I think
The
that,
theme of our evening.
and exactly, and I was so impressed by that, and then I want to go back to the original charter that Dave was very much responsible for, and how that was such an integral part of the original charter, and it was a terrific conversation to hear, because it makes you realize why this was started, and people keeping their eye on the ball, and their focus on this terrific, reward of trying this way of doing things. It was impressive to watch, and I would encourage all the other trustees to occasionally drop in on a program committee meeting, because it is terrific for a non-educator like myself to really understand firsthand the importance of some of the elements that are in the charter. And where we have new trustees going on, I think at some point we probably need to have a revisit as part of trustee education of really what the charter is all about. Because I think in the program committee meetings, you really get a sense of it more than any other time, except when you're walking through this building itself. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your time and mindfulness doing that. Okay, governance committee. Jay, you want to recap?
Well, we talked about a number of things. I think the thing that I would like to bring to the board now is that which the governance committee deals with, is that 2 members' terms are shortly coming up. One immediately and one, I guess, in June, June or August. And we would strongly recommend that Dave Buchanan and Jay Featherstone get another shot at this business, Jay Featherstone. But both, I won't speak for myself, but I think Dave is an essential part of this outfit, and has been all along, and we would be really missing something big if we didn't snap him up while he was still absent-mindedly agreeing to serve another term.
We need a motion.
I wonder what we do.
Often when we do the elections, you can actually have a double header, so to speak, to continue the free agent analogy there. But we can have a motion for each, or we can have one motion that it's just like when you're electing board members. If you have 2 people that come on a slate, you can put them on at the same time. So I don't, Tony, do you see any reason why we wouldn't?
The only thing I wonder about is, will the date of the new term begin at the same time from this meeting forward? Because one of the things we have to be really careful of in stability of the board is transitions, and obviously as we expand the board, it becomes less of an issue. But in the future, to have both 2 such valuable members both disappear on exactly the same date would not be good. And so, if it would be better in terms of staggering even over a period of months to vote and hopefully approve Dave Buchanan now and then Jay Featherstone in June, then that would be a good idea. Having said that, through the chair, I'd just like to say that having worked very closely with both of them, that they'd be invaluable in their counsel to me personally, and I think to making sure the school survives. And that while you might question someone who has safely run through a minefield once, wanting to actually sign on to do it again, I think that we should snap them up, as you say, very quickly and put their running shoes on.
Would you also, besides Dave and Jay on the governance committee, who else is on the governance committee?
Well, that's it right now. We've had a discussion about adding more people. I would like to be on it, but I don't want to be on it until there are 5 people because of quorum issues.
But wouldn't you want to have the governance committee make a recommendation officially? Usually is a committee that makes recommendations to the full board, and the full board votes on it. So the governance committee could make that recommendation staggered at once, and the board could vote on it.
Right. That's a good point. The other member is Art,
Oh, okay, so then Art could make, that's what I'm saying, you don't want to recommend yourselves, obviously, then Art could make a recommendation.
That's a very good point.
And you can stagger those and make an official recommendation to the board for
Yeah.
future meeting.
And I should have made it clear that it was the view of the governance committee that we should move on this way. So whatever motion we need, I leave to your judgment.
I think we're talking about two very close dates anyway. I think I just want to take a moment to let this, do we have a term limit issue under our bylaws?
Yes.
So it's 2 terms. So what that would mean is that when both of your terms expire, it's over anyway, unless there's some other, so there's really, in this specific case, it's not, staggering their terms is not going to have an impact because they're
You're right.
literally both gone. But Aaron, that is a terrific point. And I think that in this case, it's just the way it's worked out, that your terms are over at the end of the next 3-year term.
The other thing, just through the chair, I'd recommend, because I haven't read the bylaws recently enough, but if the best practice now is actually to have defined terms, but not necessarily term limits. You can actually, nonprofits, particularly schools, have found that you can have extremely valuable members on the board who are serving multiple terms and make that commitment. And what you really want is a mechanism that is helpful both to the trustee, who may have limits on their own time and on with multiple commitments, to step off in a reasonable fashion because the term is defined, but that you wouldn't necessarily stick to having what some have moved to, where you can do 2 terms, then you have to step off for a term, and then you can come back on again. Because the problem they've found with that is that once people step off, they don't come back. And that schools and nonprofits have lost really valuable resources and assets to the institution because of term limits. So I would just at some point we go back and review that
Yeah,
again.
Tony, I think that raises a bigger issue, and that's something I think the governance side will take a look at, is just revisiting our bylaws, because there were a couple of things in there that we need to address.
Before we vote, you should look into it.
It's a really important.
Actually, again, the vote, we can,
Our vote's just for the next 3 years.
This vote's for the next 3 years, and certainly we can act it. The discussion that Dave has just brought, the idea that, about, reviewing the bylaws and everything can happen, and it's not, there's nothing prospectively changing everything, it's just whatever happens going forward. If terms are now allowed not to be limited, then when Dave and Jay's terms expire, 3 years from now, they'll be able to be renewed again under whatever the new bylaw is that's put into place at the time.
Okay.
So there's nothing that's going to, if we vote now, just because we've had this vote will not in any way prejudice what happens going forward. We'll have a new set of bylaws that will control that event when it happens, providing those new bylaws are in place.
So you can make a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we renominate Mr. David Buchanan for another term as a Board of Trustees member.
Let's see, I second that nomination. Any discussion?
Actually, I think it's a big
Okay.
Strangely enough. Thanks for the kind words, Tony and Jay. I do want to just say that I appreciated your comment the other day at governance time about having a process by which there's some discussion with board members about where they stand, where they want to go, how they might best put their skills to use for the board. Along those lines, I would like to direct my attention more toward the program, the quality program in the school, and not to some of the other tasks that I've been doing too much of for 2 years. And so I put it out that I would request that we as a board decide on another way to take care of the secretarial position that I'm currently holding. To find another person who's going to pick up those duties. And I would request that we do that by June, so in the next couple of months. make that transition.
And it gets raised in the bylaw, one of the bylaw issues to take a look at is we currently have a list of offices and officers, and that needs to be reviewed, and,
Right.
so.
But regardless of that, that position, those tasks have to be taken care of one way or another. And I just would like to pass those on.
Can that position be held by a non-board member? Secretary? All right, please.
Several months ago, we talked about adding possibly a secretarial and a treasurer position.
Executive function.
They're actually in the
Yeah,
bylaw.
there it is, so that's different there.
Right, so maybe in our effort to recruit another board member, we can have those either combined or with one particular set of skills in mind, that somebody could contribute to the whole board, but if they have a certain skill set with secretarial, doing the redoing all the secretarial minute things and other documents that you've been working on since I've known you, to take that out of Dave's responsibility.
I think we've talked for several meetings about the idea of bringing on at least 2 more members before the end of the academic year. So I think that sort of turns up the heat a little bit on that. So I think that point is well taken. Certainly appreciate everything Dave has done. If there's been anyone who has been vigilant about the minutes and protocols, and again, back to the earlier discussion about being true to the charter, Dave has really toed the line, and it's really terrific that, there's a lot of turnover in new founded organizations because there's a lot of disagreement about how to run this thing once it's up and going. It's wonderful to have Dave, still acting as a very steady Northern Star that is, keeping us, in the right direction on things. And it's little stuff, that the minutes are important, and these open meeting laws are very important to our, our faithfulness to our DESE requirements. So I think what Dave has done is very good, and I think if we absolutely are told that we have to fix this by June, then we're all on notice that we've got to deal with this. So I appreciate what you said, David. More importantly, I really appreciate what you've done in that capacity, because it's been a lot of work, and there's no doubt about it. Having tried to review a couple board meeting minutes or the retreat and all that stuff, it's an awful lot of work. So thank you, Dave, for that. Any more discussion on Dave's nomination for secretary?
From my experience on nonprofit boards, which basically we fall under, the secretary to the board does not have to be a board member.
Okay, fantastic.
They can be a hired personnel. They can be they can be a volunteer, as long as they're appointed secretary. Yeah.
As long as we revise our bylaws too.
As long as
In accordance with the bylaws.
Yeah, I was thinking like the official office of secretary, treasurer, chair, vice chair, kind of thing. But your point is taken. I mean, we just need a functional, it doesn't really matter what their status is in terms of the organization.
So in order to move things along, I just think we have to have that as either another agenda item for the May meeting, and June meeting.
It's already on the governance.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's a great point. So, okay, any more discussion on Dave's nomination? All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show is duly passed.
Unanimous.
One abstaining vote, actually. Okay, so the second, I'm sorry, yeah, we do, yes. And now the second motion, under agenda article number 5, subset D, would be the nomination of Jay Featherstone for another 3-year term. Do I have a first for that nomination?
Second.
Second, thank you. And discussion, please.
Again, obviously, just to reiterate, the council on a number of really key fronts. Jay, as we all know, is equally, Caitlin came from somewhere, and clearly has the same passion for education, the articulateness, the passion, Jay has, I think, kept all of us at various times excited about what we've undertaken. Clarity of thought, and more particularly for me, as someone who has really lived through multiple times being the head of an organization, particularly a school, and the difficulty that can bring on multiple levels. Just incredibly sage advice, timely, and I'm deeply appreciative of those efforts, and so delighted that you are willing to run through the minefield yet again.
I would just add to that, Tony, that, there's a lot of people that make this school happen and have made this happen. And Jay's a bit quiet about what he does, what he contributes, but, he's been very instrumental in putting together professional development for teachers that you might not have even heard about, but he did that through the last summer. And spending time allowing Tony some meeting time, some very much needed meeting time to do some planning with Jody and whatnot. So there's things that may seem very tiny in the space of all what happens in a day, but it all adds up and makes a big difference. So I really appreciate that.
I'd like to add too, Jay, thanks for maintaining your connections to Project Zero, Steve Seidel and that whole group, because that has provided, been a launch pad or a platform for some people in this building to realize that there's a larger scheme of things going on to support the kind of things we're trying to do here. So thank you for keeping that going.
I had an interesting experience, just to digress slightly here, but when I was rock climbing in Scotland a couple of years ago, I actually worked with a geography teacher at the school in Ireland whose name was Emily Jones, quite well known, sort of common Welsh name, amazing climber. And so I was climbing in Scotland and met this other group of climbers and said, they said they were on their way to Wales to climb. And I said, I climb quite frequently with this guy from Wales, Emily Jones. And they both stopped and they said, is that the Emily Jones? And I had not known how famous he was as a rock climber and outdoorsman. And in its similar vein, I was at a meeting of the collaborative group of principals that we joined back in November. And one of the newer young principals, I said, was talking about the board and talked about various things there. And Jay came up in the conversation and he said, is that the Jay Featherstone? And of course it is, the Jay Featherstone.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. I would just like to say one thing. The first time I met Jay, we had lunch together, and Jay was what I consider to be the perfect sort of trustee composition. A great deal of experience and a lot of gray hair, but also a skeptical attitude. I'll never get Jay saying, charter schools themselves may not be the best answer for this. There are a lot of other things that can accomplish this. It's a very unique proposition that needs to be done properly to work well. But I love the fact, Jay, that you had a higher educational view. That this was never going to be one size fits all. This was never going to be there's only one solution and only one way to do it. And I've heard you repeat that when the movie discussion came up about some of the conclusions of the movie, like Waiting for Superman, and while you were just saying, it's really not just about the charter movement, it's about education as a whole issue in the United States, and that goes into a lot of other issues too. I thought that was a very important thing as a kid who grew up in the time of civil rights and everything. I think you see education as a bigger issue than something that is just going to be addressed by one entity. And I think that was for me a very big moment, because I think that's an important chapter to model. It's really about delivering a very high quality educational product, no matter what the format is. And again, the skepticism is what every trustee should have, even if it's our own charter. So
I appreciate that. This is not the time for it, but at some point, as a charter, we should talk about where the charter movement is going in the United States. Charters like ours that are local and have a vision are getting increasingly rare. and that the charter management organizations that are coming in look to be a lot like school boards and school bureaucracies with no accountability. And you know, at some point, I would very much like us to think a little bit about the charter movement and what the independent and visionary charters that actually enroll poor kids can do to keep the movement honest. Because I don't think it is going in honest directions. I think it's I've shared Diane Ravitch's skepticism about the wider charter world, even as schools like ours are really bright spots. So, but that's another conversation another time.
So, any more discussion about Jay's nomination? Maybe no other discussion. Could I see a vote to renew or renominate Jay for another 3-year term? All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show. I believe, Jay, that's the votes. Now it's to the governance committee then?
That's what we needed.
Okay, terrific. Okay, let's see, how are we doing time-wise? I get 7:33, excellent. We will now have approach item number 6, the update on current staffing and plans for hiring staff for the 2012-2013 academic year.
So I don't know whether to use that as a segue into this PowerPoint presentation on strategic imperatives. Just briefly in terms of specifically on staffing, the process we're engaged in at the moment is to all staff will be doing a self-assessment in a SurveyMonkey-based tool, which and Jody and I will be filling in the same document, and then we'll be meeting with staff that are eligible to return to talk about next year and make some decisions there. As we put the budget together, I think many of the same things that we had in initially for next year are still extremely important in our staffing. The ideal model for schools with a diverse student population such as ours is to have your general ed teachers in every classroom, and then as a minimum have certified special education teacher that is shared between the two sections. So for example, if you have two sections of 2-3, you have the 2 general ed teachers plus a special ed teacher. That's a very high priority for us to do that, to continue to have music and the arts front and center for the school. And that means continuing both the ability to have an instrumental program and the choral program in music. But along with the arts, to look at the Director of Arts Integration position, because we're now going to be K through 8. So multiple classes all needing fine arts. And so looking at what our expectations and needs are, the Director of Arts Integration, and thinking about the demands on her time in terms of being sure that we've got staffing that will allow all students to be experienced and engaging in the fine arts and the other arts as well, but also really being mindful that we want the Director of Arts Integration to be working not just with the arts teachers, but with the general ed and special ed teachers as a team, working collaboratively on creating a particular culture so that the mission is living within the school. And that means, time to go in and visit general ed classes, time to work with that team of educators. And so we have to be mindful of that. I'd like to see language come into the school. The earlier, all research shows the earlier you're exposed to language on a regular basis, the better. And so that's another priority for hiring for next year. And literacy, that we'd be lucky to have on a very part-time basis a good literacy coordinator, but that's another essential position as we think about the educational programs, to have someone with those mix of abilities. And school psychologists, and one of the areas that Susan Hogue has been particularly good at championing and educating, I think, is the needs in terms of support of all students, and not just from a state compliance point, but in terms of effective delivery of services and what those services should be. And so these are areas that we're looking at very closely as we look at budget priorities. And when we present the budget, we'll be going through the rationale at the different levels of enrollment, tuition income, as to where decisions might get made, depending on where we come in. And then I have this other piece, which I can go into in terms of other elements of this, as we think hiring is only one piece of the work that we're doing for positioning for next year and putting a budget together. And so I don't know whether to segue into that for next or just stick with this specific issue around staff and hiring.
My recommendation, Tony, would be let's deal with that as a whole block when it comes up to goals, because I think the whole strategic goals, it's got to get a unified discussion.
The other piece, sorry, in terms of the staffing, the other thing we're looking at is that we're really wanting to have a mix of young and creative teachers who bring a certain type of energy into the building, but also having really experienced staff. And we really missed that this year. That's been very, very hard. And so one of the things that we have done at the moment is that in beginning to put together that preliminary budget, we took the benchmark salaries and we stuck in salaries so that at the moment, and I'm making no promises that will manage to stay in there, but at the moment, for each general ed teacher and a mix in the special ed as well, we've put in salaries that are benchmarked for 10 plus years experience to get in the mix of experience that we're looking for. And we'll have to see how that shakes out as all those priorities and needs. But those are the ones that at least pop to mind immediately.
Just to add on what Tony was saying, in our program committee meeting, we talked about having the experienced teachers so that we could begin to develop relationships with local colleges and universities for internship programs, which provides extra support for classroom teachers, but it also provides a creative and somewhat alternative arts integration-based experience for teachers who would like to do a bit of a departure from the mainstream. So
it requires veterans, not novices.
That's right.
Right.
What about physical education and recreation?
Yeah, all those standard pieces are in there. So phys ed, and obviously the needs for that are much broader because you're talking about a bigger student body. So
I have a question of how you're going to get these experience, the best and the brightest. I think that we need to do some creative outreach to people. People know other people, because just by going through a general ad, I don't think you're going to get these people. I don't know who has contacts, but certainly we need to reach out to people who are the best and the brightest. We need them here.
Yeah, and actually it'd be great for people to sort of feed any creative ideas around that. We are registered for the Leslie, Salem State, Harvard Grad School of Education, and there's one other, job fairs, but they actually occur quite late. We also took out negotiated an annual subscription to School Spring that has unlimited postings. It has, and they agreed to actually spread the cost of that. Last year we couldn't afford it, and it ended up being very expensive because you buy so many postings for a certain dollar amount. And
But is that the way to get these people who are, really exceptional in their field?
I think it's a good point, Susan.
It's a good point.
And I think maybe the job fairs is one thing at colleges, but we did do that last year, and we had a certain.
yeah, it tends to be young. I mean, that's where the connections.
How we're going to do that outreach.
There's headhunting companies that specifically deal with elementary and secondary school teachers.
I think part of
And they pay the teachers to look for the jobs. You don't pay.
Yeah, it'd be worth. We could look at that as well. And what from just the experience of the last couple of years, what's worked really well for us is letting executive directors and teachers that are in like schools, similar schools, know that we're looking, so that, we really need to be in touch with any contacts we have with schools like Pioneer Valley. I've talked to Nina Collin-Hamps over at Marblehead, and I think letting them know, here's what we're looking for, and can you get the word out, and if there's anyone you're seeing that you're not able to hire but you would, please, send them our way and let us know. But I think that's, for example, Shay already has, because of her contacts, she's funneled several teachers in different areas in our direction, and I think that, having a known quantity, so it's not just experience, we want to get them all in the classroom and actually see them, which helps, but also having someone who really knows them tell you that, yeah, this person really gets it. Because the other piece of it is experience, but it's experience as much as possible doing what we're trying to do, which, that education team concept that really is in the charter and that I was talking about the last program committee meeting, I think is an essential thing to actually have existing, in fact, in the school for next year, which is these teams of educators, special ed, arts, and general ed, who are really working together in a very specific way.
So when you hire these people, do you have a team that interviews them, and who's on the team? Because you need people from different points of view to ask the right questions at the right time. I know nothing about phys ed, so what would I do to hiring a phys ed teacher? I think, how do you do that? Do you have a team? I mean, how does the school hire people?
Well, we didn't have that many people last year, so. But yes, going forward, it should represent that same structure you're wanting to create should be in your hiring committee. So it's having, general ed, special ed, your head of school, your curriculum people, and because of the experience on the board, I think as much as possible having the board educators in here doing. Jay came in last year, and he and I did a lot of classroom visits with some of the teachers that came in. But it's having that group, but ideally it's committing to certain parts of the process where you're going to be in there for all of the ones who are interviewing for that particular job, because then you really get the feedback of they've seen everybody, and that whole group has seen everybody. So you make better decisions that way.
I'd like to recommend that maybe the program committee and the governance committee can work together to figure out recruitment strategies as well as interview, team organization, and then present that to the head of school, the executive director, and the board chair, and then kind of get a system in place so that when interview time comes, we don't have to shoot from the hip to create interview teams or a group, but rather it's in place.
It's a good idea. It's a very good idea.
You understand what I mean, Tom?
Yeah, I'm happy to have any thoughts and feedback people have on the process. So
the other piece of this, which maybe you were about to mention, is to scan who is in school now and make sure we have a retention strategy for people who are strong.
yeah, well, that's what
So that we
part of this
miss
survey.
out on
Part of this survey thing is to affect those conversations happening and be able to hear from them where they're at and what their thoughts are.
Just one tip that I heard recently that Stonebridge Montessori is combining with the other Montessori
They
in
are.
Beverly.
There.
And there's likely to be some staff that overlap, shall we say, that might be looking for other positions.
I know through contacts that there's a significant number of some very strong staff who, because of the merger, are actually looking.
Yeah.
So it's not just that there's overlap, I think there's mixed feelings about what's
And so for, especially for K1, Montessori approach would be very much in line with a lot of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder, actually, because I have contacts at Stonebridge. So.
Okay.
Okay, Tony, is that the current staffing update? Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we'll move on to the update on the executive director evaluation and contract negotiations. Just want to say this has been a long time in coming. It's been quite a lot of work has gone into this. I would say that during the last academic year, for various reasons, most of them very good reasons, there was not an evaluation done, so the board was not experienced with going through this. Many of the board members are different even so since then. We were very fortunate to have an evaluation templates put together by the governance committee, and then with the help of Dave and Jay and others, and Art, who came up with a fairly thorough list of areas for review and evaluation. I think there were 7 areas in all. And the evaluations themselves were done, I believe, in November. The reports came back into the December time period, at which point we had, as a board, our hands full with DESE and other considerations. And then we met, I believe, with Tony late January, Art and I did, to discuss the preliminary findings on that. We have there's several parts of the evaluation piece. One is just the evaluation for the sake of doing it. Part of the charter school practice is to constantly be evaluating and see what we can do better, see where the improvement is, where are our assets, where are our liabilities, how do we maximize the assets, and how do we improve on the liabilities. That work will be ongoing. It happens. The board needs to do its own evaluation of itself. And I think that this was the first board evaluation of the executive director. We have seen some sort of the things that we find useful in the evaluation and things that we probably need to address going forward. On a very, very general, almost like survey level, when we looked at the overall, the quantitative results, we had 5 categories. Consistently exceeding expectations, sometimes exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, sometimes meeting, and that's to be distinguished from sometimes exceeding, not meeting expectations, and then not applicable, meaning in theory that the trustees who were delivering the evaluation did not know how to grade that particular thing. The spread of the percentages showed that 11.8% felt that there was consistently exceeding expectations, 23.7% felt that sometimes exceeded expectations, 30% felt that it was Tony was meeting expectations consistently, and there was 16% that said sometimes meeting, and 3.8% said not meeting, and 13% said not applicable. So in the match, you had expectations, they're sometimes always, sometimes exceeding, consistently exceeding, totaling about 82%, which I think is a pretty decent record considering the kind of year it was and how we ourselves as a board are grasping with some goals that are immediate and some are that are long-term, and the evaluation issue is probably easier to work on when we have a very, very strong, clear path of what has to be done over a consistent period of time so we can see improvement. We've had a lot of issues that really need to be probably more closely looked at in future evaluations so we can get more accurate feedback. We were able to say that in there were 7 total areas, 3 of which we identified that Tony was doing extremely, were asset areas, and 3 others where we felt that there were improvement areas. I think the whole evaluation process for us has been a healthy one in that we not only learn about how the board feels about Tony, but we learn how the board feels about itself and its ability to give evaluations. The evaluation process has a second part. That's the first part, just the annual exercise of an evaluation. Second part is how this will impact Tony's discussion regarding the contract negotiations. What I think we would like to propose is that we hold an executive session as early as this Saturday to start the discussion. The evaluation will be one piece of this, but certainly not the whole piece. And I would say that in part of the executive session, Tony will be present, and in part he will not be present. So I'd also say that it's important to remember that in any open meeting law situation, the executive session is good until the matter is resolved, but there are other issues that retain the right of privacy with them for as long as that person is still alive, basically. And the right of privacy goes to evaluation content, personal health issues, and anything that relates to contracts. So part of this has been reaffirmed recently in a case called the Wakefield School Committee, which affirmed that there is in fact a right of privacy. So some of the issues will emerge from the executive committee when the matter of Tony's contract is resolved, and some will always be protected by the right of privacy. So I just want to let everyone know that that's the framework that we work with when we go into executive session. Having said that, I think that I would like to hear a motion for going into the executive session, provided that the Saturday meeting is a good time. Maybe we need to discuss a time for that meeting first, or does anyone have a
time?
Do we have a time that's good? Is 10 o'clock a good time for everybody on Saturday morning? I'm thinking that, my thought is on the Saturday thing, it's that we could have voted to have an executive session tonight, but here it is, 7:45. We've had a long meeting. Some of us have been through 2 or 3 meetings today. And I think if we want to be fresh, be sharp, have a good conversation, and also have our attention undivided, we need a separate meeting that will allow us to do that. Is everyone?
How about 10 in the morning?
I'm fine with that. Let's go around the room. Aaron, what's your Saturday look like? 10, okay?
Hockey early in the morning, other than that.
Other than that, what time is hockey out?
7.
It's
6:30.
It's done at 6:30?
No, you get on the ice at 6:30,
Okay.
done by 8.
Okay, fine. Do you have to travel far? Is this a hot traveling? Okay, so you'll be fine. Tony?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Tony gets me longer for that, okay? I'm fine for 10 o'clock, all right. Okay. Dave?
It'd be better for me with family plans if we could do it earlier.
Even earlier?
We've just got plans later in the day.
9?
To leave.
Start again?
Yeah, what time's the cleanup again?
Well, I think A's can come around 8:30, but people can come anytime. They can
Or
fit
if
it
I
in their
can
schedule.
bounce back and forth, probably.
Yeah, that's fine.
9 o'clock?
Would that work?
9 a.m.?
Is everyone okay with that? Jay?
I won't be able to be, I'm out of town this weekend. I did want to say 2 things about the evaluation. One is that I think in the discussions that I've heard about the evaluation documents that we were filling out, that there wasn't a lot of clarity necessarily about whether people were talking about this year or the last year. And I think anyone who has been around during last year, I think would say that Tony had tackled an impossible job, that the demands on the executive director were surrealistically multiple and manifold, and a good sum anyway of the board's criticism of Tony last year, which all of us had, came out of the fact that Tony was doing 5 or 6 impossible things all at once, all the time. That's one thing I would say. The second is that this year, even with our budget setback, we've had a much more normal school year, and we're slouching toward you know, being a regular school, which isn't beset by constant crises. And I would just keep that in mind in this evaluation. I think the evaluation is a valuable thing, and the spirit of our intention is to constantly evaluate both the board and the executive director and how we're doing all the time. I mean, to be a place where evaluation is kind of built into this. But especially since I won't be here, I would just wanted to say, you know, how crucial Tony has been. This place would not exist if it weren't for Tony. And all of us can write, you know, we could play on the piano things about Tony that we don't wholly like, but the general picture I have of Tony in relation to this school is that he has been indispensable, and that we would be nowhere without Tony and his effort. So, since I'm not going to be here, I would just want to make that public.
Thank you. Joe, very well said. I think a lot of us, and one thing the surveys don't capture, again, in the normal course of administering the survey, you would want all factors being equal. So you can detect any time that a person is off the chart, so to speak, from where they should be. If anything, the last 18 months have been anything but all factors being equal. There's never been a steady course. Priorities emerge, priorities you know, suddenly appear, crises happen. And that's, to a certain extent, even when things are smooth, that's always going to happen. But there was this nascent, you know, coming together of the organization and a lot of, you know, very strong elements, you know, coming in and clashing, and there was a lot to handle. And there's no way that a survey really is going to do justice, because it's not going to be probative or predicative of future, because you're never going to have a future like the past you just had in this situation. And that's a very important thing to understand.
Well, James, the only constant in this whole game of education is change.
Right.
That's the constant. Everything's going to change every year.
Yeah. Well, there certainly are. Well, that will be constant. I think that in the starting at the entity stage, there's some things that hopefully we don't have to look forward to tackling again. But I would say that you know, we can look at this evaluation as a good starting point, because it does allow us to begin benchmarking. And as I said earlier, we did lose a year, and I think probably for good reasons. But if we want to be, as Jay said, if we want part of our culture to be constantly evaluating, we have to start doing this on a regular basis, and make sure that we're all good at doing it, and that we're all kind of aware of, you know, where we are. We can provide value as evaluators, and where we don't. And if we need more education on it, so be it. I think we had a very, very good session with fellows over the summer to talk about, you know, what had been accomplished, what the goals were, what some of the difficulties were in doing evaluations. You know, there's a whole list of issues just that are attended to that whole chart, where you've got the management on this side and oversight, and, you know, where you cross the line. And I think that's where a lot of attention has to be paid on, you know, how we, you know, make an evaluation given where we are on this chart. Are we evaluating for oversight, or are we evaluating for management? If we're evaluating for management, do we have the skills to evaluate for management? If we're evaluating for oversight, are we clear on what our mission and goals are? I mean, this benchmarking thing is very, very important, and I see that in the notes for the agenda, we have another item which I asked Tony to adjust, which is, and this is almost mind-blowing, the goals, it's the evaluating process and goals for the executive director. I think, you know, the evaluation really only becomes meaningful once we have consistent goals set against. So what I've asked Tony to do is talk a little bit about goals and sort of lay the foundation in that way, so that when we meet on Saturday, we've all been a little prepared for, you know, a discussion about goals as well, because this is really the crucial thing. It's one thing to evaluate what's happened in the past. It's another thing to say, what's our program? What's going to happen going forward? And Tony probably, you know, judge you against that.
James,
So,
before we go down that.
Yes.
Go down that
yeah,
road,
please,
Could we, do you have an overall sort of just summary of what the strengths identified on the evaluation
Sure.
were? And
I'm sorry, I
the
didn't-
areas,
right.
the goals for Tommy Blaze?
Well, this is where, okay,
To
so,
improve on. And I
Yeah.
think we need to do that
okay,
and not
sure.
postpone it.
Sure, no, as we said, there's 7 areas that we looked at. In strongest assets, school environment, that would be culture, professional conduct. And again, I leave that up to the educators to, whether or not, and then fiscal management. And I'll just say, because that's a little more of my skill set than anyone else's, what we went through this past year and not even going the year before, which I have no experience on, which maybe some people, did take into account, but, starting the year off with a 35% haircut and then another 8% haircut, really, that alone, as most everyone knows who has to balance the budget at home, is enough to really put you off. I mean, when the money is not going well, it messes up everything else. And I think these asset areas are very well deserved. I think Tony speaks better of culture and presents that extremely well. Again, professional conduct, I think that in academic and in interpersonal dealings speaks for itself. And fiscal management, I think, has been superb. The executive director's designated improvement areas being personnel management, communication, and we call leadership/management areas. So again, I'm not an academic, so it's hard for me to objectively discuss what these criteria mean. I just would say that it's for Tony to discuss in these improvement areas what his thoughts and his plans are. And he's more than happy to discuss issues that evolve around those subjects. And if there's a plan to address how he will address improvement in these areas, I would love to hear that. And I think that's part of what the vision that we want to hear from Tony, again, so that we have goals that we can benchmark.
I think this should be done in executive session.
Well,
These goals, these personal goals.
Well, that's a good question, but the idea of the general overall strategy, I think, is a good thing to bring up, because it's board material. So, I mean, I'm open to it. I mean, this is not something that we have is written in stone. I was thinking that it would be helpful for us to review Tony's strategies going forward. Because this is not going to be backwards looking. This is not perspective. This is going to be about future goals that we can benchmark Tony against going forward. So I would be, if we were going to discuss the details of the past evaluation, yes, that would definitely be appropriate for executive. I would say that in terms of the future goals and the benchmarking, I would go, Tony, I'm open.
Well, I think, first of all, I appreciate, Ira, your comment, because already we've gone into territory that I'm surprised at in a public session. So,
Yeah, really.
But it's been an interesting process to be a part of, because in feedback, both individually and some written in suggestions, there seems to be sometimes a misunderstanding between professional development, which critique is essential to your ongoing growth as a professional, and that's one element of what the evaluation identifies, and goals, because you have goals in your own professional growth and development as I say, as a professional, but in fact, my goals as an executive director are the school's goals if I'm in that position. And so where the school's going, what its needs are the goals that should be defined for me in going forward, and the goals that the board should be measuring me on. And so it's been interesting to feel a little bit like there's not always clarity on where the focus should be in terms of identification of goals. And so I went back and forth a little bit myself, and what I've actually prepared here are what I see as the strategic imperatives for the school right now. This is my opinion. It is something which other people hopefully will have discussions, the board, on Saturday. I would actually recommend reconsidering Saturday. I think that this discussion both in terms of the ED contract, your needs in terms of an ED, and where you're going as a school is something the entire board should be present for, and it's that important. So it's unfortunate Jay can't be here, but I would consider taking an extra couple of days and delaying on it so that everyone could actually be present for it, because I think it's really a central board issue. If you want, I'll launch into this. You can take it from there. It's really more from a perspective of whoever you have as your leader. There's the immediate needs of the school and its strategic imperatives, and this is something you need to be thinking about as you consider where you're going, because the discussion you're having is only on one level, reaction to evaluation of me and what came out of that evaluation. The other piece of it is where are you going as a school, what are your immediate needs in the next few months and next year, and then what are your long-term needs. And that may end up having different pieces to it in terms of what you're ultimately going to need and where you're going, but also what you're going to need very quickly.
Before you present, I think we as a group have to make a decision about meeting Saturday or meeting another time so Gordon and Jay can be a part of the meeting before you start.
Yeah.
I have discussion.
Through the chair, just a thought on that, because having some sense of what at least what the imperatives might be, may help you decide whether you're going to wait on the actual meeting. But
I'll have the chair speak to the chair himself on that one. I really believe it's important, even though we're missing Gordon right now. I think it's very important that we get some insights into Tony's vision about what the strategic initiatives are going forward. I think we need to do that now. Are we? Yeah, I mean, it's a board decision, but I think this is, it's right here in the agenda, the goals, and then again, it's an important part of benchmarking. We may want to do an evaluation at the end of June, based on the fact that the last 6 months has been very different than the first 6 months.
And any public school has a very similar process to this. It's very public for superintendent. So I don't think there's any issue about presenting goals for the future.
I think Tony's in favor of presenting goals, aren't you?
Yeah.
So Dave's point is for the rest of us, again, we're not looking prospectively, we're going forward. We're saying this is what Tony's about in terms of where he feels the energy and the resources and the time has to go. And as a board, we need to know that, because that's what we're going to use as criteria for whenever the next evaluation is. I think it's great that we do that now, because one thing I wouldn't want to have the board doing is going into a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning saying, here are the goals, and then just having a discussion about it, when we've just had this, first impression 5 minutes, after our first sip of coffee.
So Art raised a good point about, our need to decide whether we're going to have a meeting on Saturday or another time.
Right, well, my position is Jay and Gordon are essential and critical members of the Board of Trustees for a variety of wonderful reasons. It is imperative, it's a moral imperative that they attend the meeting.
Well, Gordon may be there. We don't know that.
Yeah, he might.
We don't, but he's not here now to see what Tony's going to put.
Well, Tony's going to discuss this anyway, regardless of when the Saturday meeting happens.
Yeah.
Tony's going to discuss this.
Well, I have a more substantial presentation actually for Saturday. This is just to tee up sort of the importance of the meeting, really.
So that leaves us looking at, when we're back, Jay.
The 17th is out, the 24th. Did everyone get their calendars and their address books in their calendars? Aaron, I'm still good anytime after 8:30, so it's...
Or we have an evening, James, or we have an evening meeting during the week.
I mean, even during the week.
Not that that's what I'm looking forward to, but
For me, I just see this as a...
I'd recommend not doing an evening meeting and find another weekend or something where you can, I think James' point from earlier on, many boards meet during the day when people are fresh. It's a fairly critical period in the school's development. So.
Are you okay not being part of this on Saturday and having feedback,
Mhm.
you're okay.
Yeah, I trust.
Let's do it Saturday. And Gordon, I'm sure, will be there. I mean, unless he's going away.
I don't know, I can't speak for Gordon. I left him a phone call earlier today asking him if he'd get back to me about, Saturday. But,
On Saturday,
Hmm?
you're gone all day Saturday.
this shouldn't come us up.
Yeah, I'll be back on
the
the,
side now.
The 22nd.
It's up to you guys.
Okay, what we could do is, we could, we don't necessarily have to finalize that meeting. I think we do need to find out from Gordon. I think, Jay, I appreciate the fact that, you would have us go ahead and meet without, but I'd sort of also take Art and Dave's point of view, which is it should be a full board engagement, because everyone's point of view. In fact, I sent everyone an email earlier today saying, I'd love it if everyone prepared some thoughts and everything like that, so that when we came to the meeting, and this was not my idea, this was Ira's idea actually, to have something and a statement about what, what they felt about this whole process and review and their own ideas about things. So I would like to have that, everyone participate in that respect. So I think what we probably need to do is say, let's hold the date for this Saturday. Well, actually, we can't do that because there's an open meeting issue here. We really have to decide.
Push it out,
That's right.
push it out.
Push it out, okay.
So we're looking at the 24th.
Yeah.
Saturday,
Okay.
24th.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody, Saturday the 24th? It's a week from this coming Friday, Saturday?
Unless we can do it, well, we're back the 22nd, which is through the end of that weekend.
Let's just go to the 24th and then, put ourselves out of the misery here.
Same time?
Yeah. 9 o'clock?
Clock's fine.
We need to check the board up too, though.
I will, but I've got to call in and send them. Well, that will give us plenty of time. The whole thing is, otherwise we'd have to be filing an open meeting law thing tonight by midnight for this. So,
We can still do that, but it'll be for the 24th.
yeah. So anyway, okay, so let's agree that we'll have an executive committee meeting,
Executive
session, based meeting, probably one or two agenda items on the 24th.
And then we can-
9 o'clock?
9 o'clock.
Is that not
Okay.
okay? That's
Yeah.
that Saturday for everybody?
Yep. Okay. And then said that,
Second,
yeah, I don't think we don't need to do a motion for a meeting, but we
for
just.
executive session.
First of all, once we did, when we start the meeting, the way the procedural protocol is that we start the meeting, we vote to go into executive session, we have a vote, and then we go into session.
Okay.
So that's how that works. So, okay, having said that, now, finally, let's proceed with the goals part of the evaluation.
Tony, do you mind if I turn one bank of lights off?
Yeah, no worries.
How long is the freight going to be on Essex Road? Do we need to move in closer?
I don't think so, excited. We should be able to,
Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah, we will see, or we won't see.
Or you won't see.
Do you have an approximate time on this one as well?
It's not, I mean, it should be done by 8:30, I hope. 15 minutes.
Is that the most contrast we're going to get, you think?
It's gonna-
No, it's the lights heating up, so it'll come brighter. That would be- So this is focused really on what I would call strategic imperatives. So I haven't gone into huge amount of detail about program specifically. It's about the big pieces. So the ones that really rise to the top for me are pretty immediate, and I think they'll rise for all of you as well. Pre-enrollment, we needed to have it be 200 plus. That for September, we need an enrollment of 180 plus in order to even approach the kinds of things we'd like to be doing with the program. The MCAS results needed to markedly improve. Strong program, and I'll get a little bit more specifically into what I mean by that, and financially stable and viable as an institution. Because what this really, in terms of strategic imperatives, this is the point in the next couple of years where the school, because of its 5-year charter period, the school will actually become fully viable and stable as an institution for going forward for the long term, or it won't, and it won't get renewed. And the enrollment will go south and go the other way, which is primarily where your viability comes from. So the first part of it is already achieved, pre-enrollment of 207 as of today, and it will be higher when we actually file it on Friday afternoon. So strong program. In order to have a strong program, we have to achieve a number of critical things for next year, and I alluded to some of those in terms of staffing, but some of them, back here. Some of them are to do with actual culture of the school, and they're going to have as much effect as curriculum would in terms of actual materials. That we have to have a clear, shared understanding and passionate commitment to the mission across the board. Not starting from the board to the leadership of the school, to the faculty, a real understanding of what this charter means. And being sure that's part of the orientation, that it's part of the way the school is structured, in terms of the way that general ed, special ed, and art staff work together. That a creative arts integrated institution where the instruction is differentiated. In truth, not just in terms of what's written in the charter, but that it's happening in classrooms each and every day, and that the Wednesday meetings and every other structure is making sure that this is actually happening. Collaborative culture, general ed, special ed, and arts faculty working together, planning together, developing a shared language, both around arts integration, but also around how you support students with very different needs so that all students are truly being challenged appropriately. And then SPED compliant, effective delivery with sufficient support for all teachers and students, something very few schools are managing to do successfully. And so these are, in terms of strong program, I think there's lots of conversations more specific that you can have around math curriculum and pieces like that, but if these things don't happen, then the rest of it won't happen. Financial viability is in 3 major areas: to maximize the tuition income for enrollment, and that's going to have specific demands even going forward, because our pre-enrollment is not necessarily, as we all know, what rocks through the door in September. So significant time and focus is going to have to be spent on this over the next few months. Maximizing grant income, not just in terms of the regular grant income that comes from the state, but all of those other sources. And then managing to meet our private donation goals. And just as a reminder in terms of that and time, because there's lots of sort of different priorities, all of which seem important in any given moment. But in fact, we still have 40,000 in expected donations that we are wanting to come in terms of our budget just for this year. In terms of next year, even looking at the figures that we're looking at, that ideally we would be bringing in 100,000 in donations for next year to make all of these things that we'd like to see happen within the school happen. Because even at 200, enrollment, we're not at the 240. And so, you're starting to have to prioritize as you look down that list of things that we'd like to achieve in terms of arts, in terms of special ed staffing, in terms of all the materials they're going to need. We're adding the 2 grades, so we're going to have hard asset costs there. Yeah.
Just a mechanical question to me, so I can listen more carefully. Can you send us that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's only 5 slides.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? The $100,000, does that come from the fact that you're suggesting that we're not going to hit 240 like in 2 years, and that would be the gap amount?
No, you'll see, when we present the budget in April,
Okay.
you'll see why I had talked about
Okay,
this.
fine, that's fine, just
But there's some things that I think it will do, and it's because I'm wanting to put on the agenda that there is often what I think is an erroneous perception that tuition income is sufficient to actually run charter schools. And the most successful charter schools also have very successful advancement operations at bringing in additional funds to the school. And it's going to get increasingly hard to do it just from your regular state-provided income because, as you are probably aware, they've changed the rules in terms of what you're able to do with your tuition income. So now any additional unused income, at the end of the year, you're only going to be allowed to keep a small percentage of it, and the state will insist that the rest of it go back. So they're actually encouraging in structure and process for schools to make sure they spend absolutely everything or you lose it, use it or lose it, which is one of the things which has encouraged poor management in schools, whether public or any other type, for a long, long time. And so, I think that's a real shame, but it's one of the realities that early charters, as they built their per head tuition income and allotment, they were able to set aside amounts of that. In fact, if you remember looking at our budget last year, at one point we had a surplus in there at the 196 pre-enrollment that was between $300,000 and $400,000. You do that over several years, you've actually created your own endowment, and that's going to be very hard to do going forward. So what will it take to actually accomplish these strategic imperatives? Leadership. Sorry, let me go back here. So it's going to take leadership and on multiple levels. The first key is the partnership and leadership between the executive director and the board. So being on the same page, we were talking a moment about about goals for the executive director, and having real clarity on what are the strategic imperatives and how are they all being dealt with. Because what I'm hoping will be clear from this presentation is that it's not just about a specific element of the program. These larger pieces have to occur or the school will not be viable. So central to that is that partnership between board and ED. The second partnership is obviously the partnership between the educational leader and the ED, or that component of it, so that partnership works. But also that you have consistency in your leadership. We have a pre-enrollment right now of 207. Those bodies are not walking through the door yet. It's not September. We're going to have a major piece of work to make sure that we stay in touch with those families and they come through the door. Any perceived instability that's unnecessary, any perceived potential instability at any level within the program could have a significant impact unless it's absolutely necessary to the school. And could impact on the tuition income, which will impact on everything else that we're going to be looking at. Hiring. So absolutely identifying the assets we currently have in the building that we need to return, but being timely while being mindful of those who have worked hard to make sure that one of the great strengths of charter schools is happening, which is that you bring the best back. But that we also know we need experience in the building. That's going to mean some changeover in staff. And that's going to take time to do well. Absolutely, we want to make sure that we get very quickly out to not only the graduate schools, the sort of school spring, the traditional sources, but that we're really ramping up how we're getting the word out to our own sources at like schools to make sure that the pool that we have come through the door is at some level self-selecting as well. So that we're getting experienced teachers that are really interested in teaching in a charter and arts integrated environment who are actively applying to come into the school. But then in order to do it well, you want to see them teach. You want to have them interviewed by your hiring committee, and that's going to take processing time. So along with that admissions piece, staying in touch with those families, transitioning our pre-enrollment into a real enrollment in September, that's huge. This hiring piece is another big piece of work that's going to have to be done. And then board expansion and development. If we're going to move forward in terms of the skills that we need, but particularly the ability to find high net worth board individuals, we're quite rich in terms of the skills that this board has brought forward, but it's nowhere near deep enough. And the lack of high net worth individuals who are committed philanthropically to the institution is a massive weakness of the school at this point. Significant. I can't emphasize it enough. It's why I put the 40,000 in there, which is a hole we're going to have to plug. If we're not able to do something about it for next year, we're talking 100,000. And we have not got that capacity on our board at the moment. And we don't have the know-how on the board either in terms of what it's going to take to build those connections. And that's important because it gets to the second one, which is outreach. And outreach is on a number of critical levels. There's the area that Art was alluding to earlier, which is that if we're going to have the supplementary educators, both special ed and general ed, who are working with us, then it means developing a program that is worthwhile for practitioners to come to and engage in. That takes time to develop. You've got to develop your network contacts in order to actually develop the program and have practitioners who want to come do it. In order to expand the program and develop the relationships with Cape Ann Museum, the Gloucester Maritime Center, and any number of other programs, you've got to have someone who's doing outreach and is managing to do that as well. And then board expansion. You know, the North Shore has a significant number of people who are directly engaged in those organizations as well as in education and have significant needs. And we have to have time to go out and talk to them. We have to have time to get them up here and organize receptions for them in order to build that strength in the board and expanded leadership of the institution. And board of visitors, which was something which I wanted to develop this year and suggested to the board as a way of not having quite such a difficult commitment in terms of getting involved with the school. That's going to take time as well to develop that. So we have some outstanding people who have agreed. We have others in the wings that we're working on, but that needs to be developed for the strength of the school as well. And so these, just in this very short presentation, I have a much longer one that I'd like to go through with the board when we do meet. I believe these are absolutely critical strategic to achieve all of them, not in part, because I don't think we'll make it through our 5 years successfully unless we manage to achieve these imperatives.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. I think what you've outlined here is also just an excellent charter school, you know, which is, I mean, there are plenty of charter schools that are just following along, but I think this is a good example of vision, and, you know, this is something where, you know, I think that talk about as part of the culture, you know, good administrative and board partnership. You know, it's the board's job to support the executive director and what it does, and if, you know, people see this as the vision that they want to support, I think this is a great job of Tony putting this together. I look forward to a more fleshed out version of this. So yeah, I know that this was, you wanted to make this short and sweet, and I appreciate that, certainly, because we need, you know, to observe the meetings and stuff. But I think that that's sort of right on the right track about goals that we can really hang our hat on and say, okay, this is very tangible, it's very doable, but, you know, how are we going to get there? So I appreciate that, because that's really, we need that kind of long-term visibility, and we need the eye and prize about an excellent charter school. And I can see that, you know, thank you for doing the work, because it's apparent that you've got, you know, there are so many moving parts here, and there's, you know, I guess the board needs to know where we can be stronger, we can do more. I think your point that we need more board members is very, very well taken.
Well, the last thing, James, I would just leave you with, and then we're at 8:30, so I just want to be cognizant of people's time.
Yeah.
But this is extremely time sensitive. So there are a number, as you know, key pieces that are moving here to have begin conversations with staff members to process that piece, to identify where you're moving on with new hires. All of those things are dependent upon a couple of key things happening and happening in a timely fashion. Because at the moment, that number one area in terms of leadership is quite nebulous and not defined. And the longer that stays that way, the more vulnerable the institution is to actually failing at its critical, most critical moment to move forward successfully. Because it will actually cause everything from your pre-enrollment to your tuition income, to your program, to donations and giving, because at the moment we're dead in the water. So the conversations to have with network connections, with those who could give to the school, with those who might get involved long-term in the school, they have to know who they're engaging with and what they're getting involved in. And so this, just to sort of emphasize, we've put it off, which I think is the appropriate thing to do, because I think this is so important to the school that to have the full board here, even while that's difficult, to me is extremely important, because the decision is going to send a message to not just your immediate leadership decision, but it's going to have significant implications both in the short term and in the long term.
Thank you, Tony. I think the key takeaway here is that leadership on the multiple levels is the key, aspect of the success of this. And I really appreciate the time that you put into this. To the point of the March 24th, it just struck me that the Essex County Community Foundation's Trustees Institute is the morning of Saturday, March 24th. So has anyone planned on attending that this year? Is that...
Even if we had, I think this
is much more. Yeah.
Oh, this is imperative.
Exactly, yeah.
Can't go any later.
In terms of board development, I think the ECCF would be happy to come in and work with us personally if you wanted that. I'd actually just kind of leave that to Tony also to come up with the best practices, because you've done a lot already in that area, and you've obviously got a very clear handle on it. But again, thank you, Tony. I think this was a great act of leadership right here, just being able to say, we got to focus on this, and we got to get urgency about it. So I appreciate that, Tony. It's a great job. Thank you. Let's see. We've come to the end of the meeting agenda at this point, so unless there's any other comment or discussion, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, the record showed that this meeting is terminated at 8:34. Thank you very much.
I don't worry about you, Jay. Is everything okay? Are you all right?